What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and we are deep in the heart of spoiler season for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, with tons of new articles, live streams, and videos coming out about the new edition and giving us little tidbits. So much so that it can be confusing to keep it all tracked. So what I've done is gone through every piece of 10th edition spoilers and news and compiled them all for you in one easy place for your viewing pleasure. So let's talk about everything we know about 40k 10th edition for the time being. First off, some generic stuff. The real theme of all of these announcements has been simplified, not simple. Kind of easy to learn, hard to master sort of vibe is what the design team has been putting off. To that end, all existing rules and codexes are being rendered obsolete by these new rules. They're entirely changing how a lot of the datasheets work and a lot of the core rules. Instead, all rules are being moved to temporary indexes. This happened in 8th edition, when the rules translated over from 7th and had some huge changes. They are all free to print and play from day one. Datasheets and Stratagems will also be available separately in card packs if you don't want to print your own. The codexes will then be released over time to replace those indexes. So while on day one the rules will be free, and I imagine that the core rules will continue to be free, the individual unit rules will have to be purchased in a new codex as normal. That said, all of the points are being moved to a digital format, I think both on the PDFs on their website and on their new app that they talked about. This means that they can have agile points changes over the course of the edition, and they don't risk outdating their codexes before they even come out, which they have multiple times in 9th edition. Speaking of that app, they said that there is an app and it 100% works.
All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Whether or not I believe them, time will tell. The last one was real bad. Overall, there will be a new focus on reactive play with datasheet abilities and interrupt stratagems, as well as a reduction of lethality across the board, most notably with lower AP values on weapons and higher toughness values on the defensive end. They talked about big monsters and vehicles having toughness values of 11 or even higher at the top end of the stat block. There are also new cover rules that will hopefully make units a little bit more defensive, and universal special rules are back. We talked about these in a very recent video where I talked about common phrases that are used in 40k but that don't actually exist in the rules, and a lot of these are from universal special rules. Things like Deep Strike and Feel No Pain were referenced specifically, Deep Strike being an ability that teleports you onto the table, Feel No Pain being a damage ignore roll, something that you take when you suffer a wound to try to stop losing that wound. Exciting times that these are coming back. It simplifies the game and hopefully makes some more interesting interactions, where instead of having to spell out types of rules that a rule affects, you can just spell out the universal special rule and make things so much cleaner. So now let's move on from some more generic tidbits to more concrete stuff. Army construction rules are being overhauled entirely. Instead of building an army using data sheets and battlefield rules, you now choose a sub-faction, which includes all of your faction rules, including warlord traits, relics, and stratagems. I think the comparison here is like an Army of Renown, where it has a list of abilities that your army gets, as well as stratagems and things that unlock, but you don't have those from your overarching army. So instead of overlaying two sets of sub-faction abilities on top of one another, you only have what has been described as a double-sided document, so you can include it on one page if you want to print it out, that has all of the rules for your army and your sub-faction all there. You then choose a character to be your warlord. From then, you can include any number of other units, but only 3 of each non-battle line unit. Now, these are units specifically, not battlefield roles. It looks like battlefield roles are maybe going the way of the dodo, and battle line will instead be a keyword that allows you to take 6 of a unit. These are things like troops and dedicated transports in the current edition. Other unit types will just be rule of 3. You can only have 3 of them in your army, and that's it. Those are the only other restrictions. That said, some of the abilities may disincentivize you from taking multiple of the same unit, which we will talk about in this next section, referencing datasheets. Datasheets are all being moved to reference cards that include all of that unit's unique mechanics. Units will have powerful and unique abilities, but many of which will be limited to once per turn from any source. So even if you have 3 of a unit, that unit's special ability may only be usable once per turn, meaning having those extra 2 are going to be pretty worthless. This is where a lot of the old stratagems from the last version of the game have been moved. where combos are now built into individual datasheets, so units themselves are designed to work together instead of a unit being designed to work alongside a series of stratagems or enhancements. Weapon profiles are being divorced from the unit's stat line itself. Number of attacks made by a weapon and the target hit numbers like weapon skill and ballistic skill are now attached to each weapon profile, which hopefully gives the team a little bit more flexibility to design weapons that are unique and bespoke to individual special characters or units. There is a new stat on all of these datasheets that is OC, or objective control. This is effectively the weight of a unit when capturing an objective. I imagine that you will add up the number of OC on an objective, and the player with the higher amount will take that objective. So no longer are we checking for a binary OBSEC versus non-OBSEC versus model count. We're just going to be adding up our OC and calling it there. Now, we talked a little bit about reactive abilities beforehand, and according to the design team, lots of units will have these reactive abilities. Now, I made a video about how this could be potentially problematic earlier this week. Please go check that one out if you want to hear my thoughts about this style of ability. I do think that this will increase the interactivity of the game from the standpoint of somebody who plays competitively, but it could be that there is a lot to remember since you'll have a lot of these abilities active in an army at any one time. Large units like monsters and vehicles will still bracket as they take damage like they do currently, but this will be explained in an ability rather than included in the stat block. This also gives them more control over having damage affecting special abilities. You can think of units like the Silent King, who has the special abilities that turn on or off depending on their damage level, which had to be included in a special ability anyway, so hopefully you can have more abilities like that moving on. The team did specify that a Forge World index would also be released, and all of the Forge World datasheets would be indexed alongside all of the factions. So Forge World units will be playable right out of the gate alongside the new edition. Now let's move on to some more gameplay focused stuff, including the phases of the game. The morale phase has been removed entirely and moved into the command phase. Morale checks now apply something called Battle Shock, which debuffs your unit rather than removing models. In fact, no models are ever removed from morale, but that Battle Shock will debuff them and reduce their ability to hold objectives if they fail morale checks. The Psychic phase has also been removed. Units now have psychic powers that are listed on their datasheets for use in other phases. An example of which being Smite, being used as a ranged attack in the shooting phase. However, it is still referenced as inflicting mortal wounds, which means that that mechanic is probably not going anywhere and will probably still be associated with psychic powers. Now, it's not really confirmed. It looks like the team kind of danced around the subject a little bit, but it sounds like a lot of these psychic phase mechanics, like static buffs that a psyker would cast on a unit, are now being removed and replaced with special rules that are on that psyker, just allowing them maybe to target a unit to apply a buff, for example. That's totally unconfirmed. That's a little bit of speculation, but the team did talk a lot about how psykers would have ranged attacks representing their psychic powers, and then other psychic powers would be represented by an ability. I'm not sure if Psychic Tests and Deny the Witch and that kind of interaction remains in the game or is being removed, but I'm sure we'll hear more in the not-too-distant future. Specifically, Magnus the Red was being called out as having an incredibly strong ranged psychic attack that's far superior to the ranged attacks of lesser psykers. That makes sense. He really just has a smite that does extra mortal wounds right now. It would be cool if he had a super big, dumb gun. We also see some changes to stratagems. The team has specified that there are more core stratagems, more than we currently have, and those stratagems would have more interactive and interrupt style abilities, with only 6 stratagems being unlocked by your sub-faction. So you're going to have more stratagems from the core rulebook to think about, but instead of having 20 or 30 stratagems from your codex, you will only ever have 6 to worry about, and those will fit on that double-sided sub-faction page. Overall, there will be fewer command points, so stratagem use is required to be much more deliberate. And it also sounds like a lot of the pre-game command point spend is similarly being removed. This means that you'll probably start with a reduced pool of command points to begin with, but you won't be spending them so much to start the game out. However, that reduced pool will limit the amount you can stack up stratagems when it comes to your own use during the game. And with that, we have some information about alternate play formats in addition to just GT. Boarding actions has been confirmed to be fully compatible with 10th edition with little to no rules changes. I guess that's good because it gives us a little bit of indication that a lot of the core mechanics of the game aren't really changing too much. The boarding action does operate a lot like a separate play style. Combat Patrol, the 500-point level of 40k, is also being introduced as its own format with no list building. So instead of building a 500-point list of data sheets that you would use in a normal game of 40k, you simply pick a Combat Patrol box. All of these boxes are predefined armies that are theoretically designed to be played against one another. Units will have unique data sheets for use in Combat Patrol, both for simplicity and game balance, so they can pull more levers to balance the data sheets against one another and make the game a little bit easier to parse for new players. So you'll find that units in Combat Patrol may have simplified versions of the mechanics that they have in the bigger 40k games. However, they will still have those mechanics largely represented. So when you move from Combat Patrol and you graduate to a larger game of 40k, you won't be totally blindsided by your units having wholly different rules. And last but certainly not least, Crusade has been confirmed as remaining in 10th edition and will even have conversion rules to take your leveled Crusade army from the 9th edition format into 10th edition. And that is it. That was all of the tidbits we could find about 10th edition for now. Obviously, we're going to have a lot more announcements as the days and weeks move on, but I wanted to put them all together in one easy reference place. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, and let me know down in the comment section what you think about these rules so far for 10th edition 40k. Big thanks to everyone who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members and Twitch subscribers as well. All you people are great and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.